Hello, today I'm painting from my summer sketchbook and I thought you'd enjoy this picnic table. So I'm going to paint a parasol first before I put anything else in, and this one is beautifully faded. It's obviously been out all summer. If you're drawing a parasol, you just need a triangle. And then just fill the white paper and then go back and put any seams or shadows on. So I'm just changing to a smaller brush. I'm just going up to my pencil lines. And then the top of the parasol is a different piece of fabric, and so there's shadows underneath it. So I'm going to start from the top and then work down. And the shadows will have to be put in when it's dry. Now in the meantime I can put the sky in, and I've got lots of rocks that are quite dappled, so I don't want the sky to clash with it. So I'm going to wet the whole sky area so I get a softer sky, so it won't compete with the rocks. So I've got a very clean brush. I'll just put in some paint so that it merges down, and leave a gap and clouds go in from the bottom again. I've just roughly drawn the rocks just to claim the space, and drying the brush, just make sure that I can get rid of any hard lines. And then I'll go in with some Naples yellow, just warm it up a little bit. I don't want all the colours to be cool, and there will be Naples yellow in the rock. Now the picnic tables are faded wood, so I'm going to make a homemade grey, and I've already got some blue that I use for the sky, so I can start that off as a homemade grey by adding a couple more colours to it, and then adding some raw umber just as a basic wood colour. And the tables are just a rectangle. And I want to make them warm as they're in the foreground. And then the other one's a slightly different colour because it's got shadows. So I'll just mix up a slightly different mix. And I'll drop some of the different mix in there as a suggestion of planks. On the second table here you can see the edges. Really depends where you position yourself to paint from. And there's a menu there waiting for you to order lunch. So I'll just put the edge in, and the same colour for now. I can always tint it later. I'm going to use the same colour for the shadowed area because I'll go over it, but at least I know where it is. Now the legs are a little bit more complicated. You just have to, same as drawing a chair, hope for the best. Always stop and look before you start drawing, and make sure that you understand the way that the item is constructed. And then the umbrella goes all the way down to the floor. I'll put the umbrella pole in the same colour, but it is a little bit darker, but I can, at least I've claimed a space. And then there's another table nearby that's a different colour again, so I'll just use more of the raw umber. So anything that's not near the umbrella is brighter. The umbrella is changing the light levels. I'll put the legs in this one in a minute because I want to reach over and I don't want anything to smudge. So now I've got some rocks So I'm going to use the homemade grey again, but I'm going to make up a different one. This time I'm going to make it up with Naples yellow, water it down a lot. And there's a big standing stone next to the picnic table, so I'm just gently putting in a thin coat of paint to claim a space. I'm going to go in with more concentrated paint on the brush and drop it in, and it'll find its own level. And it doesn't matter if it stays in one place a little bit more than another, because it'll all help to make it look a rock. Then there's some rocks in the water nearby, but they are much more brown. So I'm just putting them in gently for now, and then I'll add a second coat shortly. While it's drying, I can put some shadows on the umbrella. So I need a small brush, and I'm going to make the shadows, because I've got homemade grey elsewhere. I'm using Paynes grey. Just gently dropping in the hints of a shadow. Doesn't have to be too dark. You can always tint it later when the picture's more balanced. First thing you do is find the space and then build up the strength of the colours. So moving back, I've got islands and rocks. So I'm going to start with Naples yellow again, very weak, and just put in the shoreline. Which has got rocks all over the place. So I'll just make a sideways mark for now. And I'm just going to get some very thin Paynes grey, almost dirty water, and just go in up with up and down strokes. Just break it up a little bit. And use some water just to make sure that they're not dominant. And then where the rocks meet the sea, they're actually brown, so I'm going to use burnt sienna and a little bit of Paynes grey, yellow ochre. Just make a dark line for the rocks. If you see very dark rocks at the waterline, it's a algal growth. It just goes a little bit along here, not too much. And then the rest of them are covered in surf, so you really can't see that much. I'll just put a few little lines in, and I can put the surf in a moment. And then going back further, I need to tint the paint because the beach is further away and it doesn't look so pristine. So I've just added a little bit of the brown to the Naples yellow to put in the beach of the next island. I'm going to use some water and just lose the edge of that upwards, because there will be some grass to put in. I'm putting the bigger island in next, and it's got a lot of grass and other things, so I'm mixing warmer colours together to give a soft green. It's not a lawn, it's a mixture of plants growing on there, so I'm just trying to make a green that's warm, but it looks slightly distant because there will be foliage to go next to the chairs. I'm going over the yacht mast at the moment, I'm not worried about that. Now, having put that in, I'll just drop some sap green in on top of it, going up to the skyline quite gently. And then there's lots of rocks and perhaps other things, a little bit of heather or something. So I'm just going to add a little bit of purple. Any purple will do. And then some brown. So I'll just go through my browns and find a mid one. All the colours will be in the instructions and giving you more information about the location, but I just want to give it some presence but not dominate the picture at this stage. And I've got to leave a line at the bottom because there's lots of rocks coming up. So I'm now going to go back to a brighter green again, sap green and chrome yellow, and just continue along the skyline. There are a few rocks there, and then the rocks are all under one end. So I'm just going to drop the brush back into where I've been just to give harmony to the greens. And then just use a wet brush to lose the dominant edge of the green there. And that'll give me more flexibility for drawing the rocks in. It's always better to have a lost edge if you can. And then moving across, it's much lighter in the middle, it's more sheltered. And it's a sign of a footpath or something, it's much lighter green. Coming in front of the rocks. And having a lighter green makes you look forward. Now behind, it's darker because it's further away and it does look slightly wooded, so I'm going to add some blue to the mix. Keeping the same mix but just adding some blue. That looks a bit stark on its own, so I'll add something else in a minute. Just going to add some Naples yellow just to give some variety. Because it's yellow, it will knock the other colours back. This bigger area here, I'm just using varied colour so it doesn't look solid. You can see that there's a variety of areas. And then there's some very dark trees, so I'm just going to add some Paynes grey to the green and put those either side of this big rock, and that will make the rock look lighter and bring it forward. There are also some very white buildings in the distance, so I might put some green round those in a minute, just to, I think I will, just to show that they're little green underneath. And then there's quite a variety of things happening on this other headland. It looks like a road or something that's quite light. So just put in 2 or 3 different layers of colour, and then they'll find their own level in a minute. Now to the rocks, I'm going to use homemade grey with a lot of Naples yellow. I'm doing up and down strokes this time because I've done the grass sideways. Just cover the white paper for now and then go back and add a few little things. Give it a moment to dry. And the next rock is very dark, so I'm just going to use Paynes grey again because it's different. And then it's got the different levels at the top, coming out to a curve, going down. Now adding burnt sienna. Now adding some indigo. Just have 2 or 3 colours on the go, just to give the shape and form of the rock. and then when it's dry I can add a little bit more. The hillside has got a very dark streak, so I'll put that in to start with, and then use the homemade grey with the Naples yellow again and go up and down from it so it's still there. And it doesn't matter if they bleed into each other slightly. It's given me the colours I need. Don't want it too dark, so just lift some off again with the brush. So while it's drying, I'll look at the area by the picnic table, which has got some wildflowers and lots of bracken. So I need a nicer colour for that, so I'm just going to clean my palette off a bit. And I kept the green in case I needed it. And I'm now going to make a green with chrome yellow and sap green together. Quite weak, and just fill the space. Going up in an arc, because that's the way things are growing. Then I can drop some other colours in a moment. I'll just put them, go up to the rock, leave space for the flowers, slightly more yellow, and just run through the wet paint. Because it's a small brush, it's slightly more concentrated, but you can see the line. Just go round in the arc again. There's lots of foliage here going different directions. That's probably the bracken. And then coming down to the table, I'll just put in a fairly solid line and then work back from that. And I'm just going to take the brush for a dance, just keep it walking, because I want to drop in any flowers when it's dry. I don't want it to bleed everywhere. And the same on the other side here, just go up against the brolly and up against the table, and then take it all out quickly before it dries, following the line I did earlier, just going out all the way. And there's more rock near the corner here, so I just need to put in a few bits of green because there will be rock showing through. So wetting the brush and then taking the paint back to infinity. That gives me a chance to put rocks on. And that warm colour has pushed the hillside back further. Now somebody's put a nice pot of flowers here, so I'm just going to use a slightly darker green for the leaves, just to give variety. And you can't see the back of the pot because of the leaves. So I'm just making marks, nothing more. I'm going to put the boats in next, before the water. And I've just put a few pencil marks in just as a guide. But what I tend to do is to check which way the boats are pointing. They should all be pointing a similar way. And just make little marks. Lots of the boats these days tend to be white, so you just leave a gap in the water, but you need some indication. So I'm putting the top of the hull with a horizontal line, then do a diagonal line down for the rest of the boat, and it's got a little cabin on top, so I'll just make a square and then get the same colour and just do a few strokes around it, going to infinity. Some of them I've got inflatable holes, so they're a slightly different shape, but just same principle. Keep going, I've got one that's white, so I'm just going to do an area around it. They have got mooring buoys and a few reflections, but that just sort of does for now. And then when the sea's in, they'll be more obvious. So now going in with a stronger colour to do the sea itself, which in this case, the Isles of Scilly, the sea can be quite turquoise because there's very light sand. So I'm mixing Cobalt turquoise and French ultramarine, which will go nicely with all the other colours, and then just start anywhere. I'm using a flat brush because I want the sea to be level. You needn't use a flat brush. Just go round the boats that I've just put in. And there's quite a lot of waves breaking on the rocks on the left hand side. So I'll go away from them, and I can add the detail of the waves in a minute. Having made the space, I'm less likely to accidentally paint over them. Then sideways strokes to give uniformity to the sea. It doesn't matter if I go over the string on the umbrella because that's quite dark brown. And with the flat brush I can just go down into the plants. So you have to keep doing, don't stop halfway through. It's important you get the sea on in one go. I'm doing exactly the same on the other side here. Around the rocks that I still have to put in, but it'll help me set the tonal values. And there's a wooden top to the parasol which I'll put on shortly. Then just go over the first area, just try and make a few more definite marks to show the wind whipping on the water. To bring the parasol forward, I'm just putting the darker post in, and then I'm going to put some patterns on the sea. I haven't done under the table because there's all sorts of shadows to go in there, but that's made a start, and it's got a wooden top. It's just where the water is being blown by the wind, and it leaves a pattern. And they're darker in some areas than others. So when you're sketching, you have to bear that in mind, that not all areas are the same. Just put them in gently. I've just changed to a smaller brush to go right close to the umbrella. And the umbrella is the same as the rocks here, that you need dark around them to show the light rocks more. And the channel actually goes slightly behind these islands here, but not showing everywhere because the rocks are higher and lower. So just putting, as I say, in England we call them cat's paws in, the pattern of the water. And you get one big streak and then lots of little ones coming from it. Whilst the sea's drying, I'm just going to look for more detail, and I can put the brown string that's holding the parasol up in. And all these little things just help harmonise the picture. So I've just got a small brush and quite dark brown as it's thin. It'll look better. There's a considerable amount of string there. And a shadow on the table. And to harmonise with the sea, I'm going to make the shadow a little bit blue. And I've got some flowers in the flower pot which will add more contrast. And then the pot is white, but it's got some good shadows. And just put in a couple of shadows. And it's got a ribbed pattern, which I can just suggest. And put a little bit more detail on the rocks behind, and then it'll help bring all the tones forward. So I'm mixing some yellow ochre with scraps of brown that are on my palette that I've used earlier, which were mostly burnt sienna and Venetian red. And just put in a sort of tide line. And I seem to have got about 3 layers of rock here, so I'm going back with the yellow ochre, just dropping some in, and then a little bit of Paynes grey, and just some diagonal strokes to break it up. And a little bit of water just to soften it. Big pile of rocks has got a lot of lichen on, which is a yellow growth you see at the seaside. So I'm just going to put some of that on and then use water to give it a lost edge. And a little bit more dark brown at the bottom, just to contrast with it. There's a few shadows of the rocks, the contours. And just go in a bit closer in some places. And then the foreshore again, just take some of the dark colours up. And then wet brush, just lose the odd edge. Now they're almost grey at the front here. They have a harder life, nothing's grown on them, but they're very light in front because the water's splashing up. So now I can move forward to the plants underneath the umbrella. But first of all, there's a lot of bracken, which is quite useful, so I can put that in because it's got a lot of shape and form. It's like a small fern if you don't know bracken. But just a few lines will indicate it nicely. You don't have to show every leaf. Just put in a few odd marks and some dark shadows amongst it. And then I've got a few plants that are quite purpley, so I'll mix the sky colour with the colour I used for the flower pot. Just put those in. And then add a bit of pink on top, so I'll use rose madder because it's quite vibrant and will lift the area. There are white plants as well, so from that point of view I'll leave the paper and just take the brush for a dance around them so that you can see there's something there. Adding a little bit more yellow to soften it. Just keep doing the brush in a circular motion, changing colour because there will again be shadow. I've just gone along and put a few more blades of grass and plants in. I've now got a few more rocks that can be seen. So I've got a warm grey, which is a homemade grey with a bit of Naples yellow added. And then when it's down, I'm just going to get a little bit of yellow ochre, just put in the middle, just to give it a more 3D effect. You can see that some bits are lighter than others. And then the rocks in the water can be a little bit darker. Put the paint in one corner and then move it forward. Now the upright rock, I can use the same principle, a little bit of yellow ochre just to give it some shape and form. Then get a wet brush, just lose the edges slightly. I can't believe I've done this. I've made the table a little bit brighter with the burnt sienna and just used a flat brush just to make the rock a little bit lighter, just lift the pigment a fraction. And now I'm going to make the shadow a little bit darker. Paintings are always a process of adjusting. I'll just make it slightly bluey green because it's under the green umbrella. And I'm going to make the flowers a little bit bolder in the pot. I like to do flowers in a couple of goes, and I've given them a chance to dry, so I can now put on a little bit of Scarlet Lake around the Azilium Crimson, just to make the heads a little bit bigger and brighter, which will help against the blue sea. Add a few more flowers in the grass. It's not a herbaceous border, it is wild, so just a few things. Going back to the rose madder again, which was quite a nice pink. Just drop that in over some of the white bits of paper and that will highlight it nicely. And then lastly, when it's dry, I'll put the legs in of the tables. If you're doing table legs, they are planks of wood that are just put on at an angle. I've just mixed up a brown from the palette with things that were left, just to put in a little bit more of the picnic table. It only needs suggesting, it's just an empty piece of paper, looks strange. This one's going out of view. And then there's dark areas. Just take it down below the seat. Got shadow, so I'm going to use the Paynes grey because I've already got some out. I just put in an area underneath that's a bit darker. Doesn't want to be too dark because it's at the seaside and there's lots of bounce light from the water. So just a suggestion. By doing that, it will make the sun bleach wood look lighter. And then there's a gap where the sun's creeping through between the benches, and then more shadow. And I'm just going to put a little bit more yellow ochre on the rocks over here, just to separate them a little bit from the sky. Just very weak colour. So this gives you an indication of St.Agnes looking across to the island of Goo. It's a delightful place, a very worthwhile a visit. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed the video.